our actual text, let's read the really quick as a quick recap the Samuel passage. That way we can pick up on some of the information from the text, and then momentarily we will jump into our lesson specifically for this week. So last week, just as a reminder, we finished almost all of the questions of 3. So we'll quickly recap that for 3. And then we will move on to 4. 4 is finding God in worship, and we'll finalize 3, finding God in the middle of conflict. So let's turn to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel, and let's just very quickly read a couple of these verses, only for the context of putting the story into its proper perspective. And then, like I said, we'll do the last question, and then we'll just move on. This lesson, if you remember for lesson 3, it spanned from chapter 2 to chapter 4. And I'll go through this very quickly. If you remember, chapter 2 is when David was anointed king over Judah. That was the crowning point in that chapter. In chapter 3, it talked about the war that was happening between the house of Saul, his son, and David, and the kingdom not being unified. And chapter 4 is when Ishbosheth was murdered, who was the son of Saul. So really quickly, because this chapter 4 only has 12 verses in it anyway, can somebody read 1 through 6, and then somebody read 7 through 12 in 2 Samuel chapter 4. 2 Samuel 4, 1 through 6, and then someone read 7 through 12.
Now when Ishbosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel was discouraged. Saul's son had 2 men who were leaders of bands. The name of the one was Bela, and the name of the other Rechab, sons of Rimmon and Zerahites, the sons of Benjamin. For Beeroth is also considered part of Benjamin. And the Beerohites fled to Gittim and have been aliens there until this day. Now Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the report of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened that in her hurry to flee, he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. So the sons of Rimmon and the Berahite, Rechab and Bela, departed and came to the house of Ishbosheth in the heat of the day while he was taken to his midday rest. They came to the middle of the house as if to go to get meat, and they struck him in the belly. And Rechab and Bela, his brother, escaped.
Now when they came into the house, as he was lying on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him and killed him and beheaded him. They took his head and traveled by the way of Arabah all night. Then they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Behold, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. Thus the Lord has given my lord the king vengeance this day on Saul and his descendants." David answered Rechab and Bena, his brother, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and said to them, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all distress, when one told me, saying, 'Behold, Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him in Ziklag, which was the reward I give him for his wounds. How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed? Shall I now require his blood for your hand and destroy you from the earth?" Then David commanded the young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hung them up beside the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the grave of Abner in Hebron.
Okay. What 3 practical steps should we take in finding God in worship? From your own words. I mean, what is worship anyway? How would you define worship? God has always been specific in how he wants things done. He's very meticulous when it comes down to certain things. We find it out in the Old Testament. God just sometimes when you're a reader and you read some of these things and you say to yourself, you know, I fear him. I love him so much. I fear him so much because of that love. But there are certain things that he just don't tolerate outside of how he defined things. And we found that some people have found that out the hard way. If he says he wants something done, he wants it done that way. He doesn't say it twice. He doesn't bother around. He doesn't stutter on it. This is what I want done. If he give prophet, king, and priest the three phases of leadership in the Old Testament, if he tell the king to do something, he wants the king to do it. When the king don't do it, there are consequences for that. That's just the way God is. Always been that way, and don't think because we under the new covenant that he has changed. He has always been that way, and he's going to always be that way. So 3 steps in worshiping God. I'm going to put one down, and then you can join in. That's one. This is not an act alone. Okay, so my first answer to this question would be our presence. God wants our presence in worship. You see that in the Old Testament. Come before me. When it's time to worship God, God wants our presence. Next.
Our hearts, he wants us to, well, I guess that's the presence of God.
But she going up, down, up, down.
Obedience.
Okay. Ricardo, is that what you was going to say?
No, I mean, so. It's similar, but Crystal got it.
Okay. Okay. That is going to be all right. Because in order to worship God, you got 11. Okay. Anybody else? I'll put praise here.
Our faith.
I'll put it this way. Faith in him. Okay. We go some more.
Well, you need
Mhm.
you need spirit in it and truth, because you're talking about true worship. So to me, you need spirit, truth, and love, because all of those other things are offshoots of
Okay.
of true worship.
All right. You just read chapter 4, right? How would you define some of this in chapter 4?
One is obedience, because like from what the part that Ricardo read was David was basically saying, you all, everyone knows how I get down from how I handled the thing when you killed Saul. So how much more you think I would be upset killing his son? Like they evoked their own what they thought he would like, which is, if you equate that as like a false worship, because they thought he would be happy. Like, oh, we got this guy's head for you. This is your enemy. And they missed everything on that board. Like they thought their interpretation of what he would like as a gift should please him.
Okay.
We see how that turned out for him.
Okay.
Kind of graphic.
All right. What else? What else? Why did something have to be done? Why didn't you just leave it alone? I mean, when God says something and we don't do it, why don't we just leave it alone? You know, we talked about last week about not getting involved. Why don't we just leave things alone? Okay, all right, he's a stickler about worship. Okay, I'll fix that. I just won't worship and I just won't go to church and I won't worship God. So I stay safe. This way I can't make it mad. Because if I go and I don't do exactly what he wants me to do, I know as a student, something is going to happen. Now, under the new covenant, I can be walking around as a dead man. I can be walking around as whitewashed tombs. I can be walking around spiritually in the grave. But I don't know that. I kind of figure I'll stay away from God. This way I don't be in danger of this part here. But obedience, love, spirit, and truth, these are the things that God is asking for. And God really don't put high demands on human beings and their inability to give him what he's asking for. He wants our presence. He wants us to love him. And he wants us to recognize and come to a level of spiritual maturity where we can identify with who he is and how he is. Now, obviously, the kingdom is divided, correct? The kingdom has to be one nation. David is trying to do that. A lot of things are going to happen. So David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron. And now someone read the next 5 verses of chapter 5.
And David made a covenant with them for the Lord. David was 12 years old when he began. And he bought him a the 7 years and 6 months, and then you being 2 years old before that. And the king and his men cried. The inhabitant of the land said to David, shall not enter here, for the blind and the lame will prevent you. They thought David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Stanley, that is the city of David. David said on that day, and was united just the time, let him get up to the water and smite the dead and the blind, tested by David's sword. So this the blind and the lame shall not come into the house.
So David went in the stronghold and called it the city of David, and he placed round about from the middle and inward. And David became great and greater. For the Lord God of hosts was with him.
Okay, stop right there, because now we're on Sunday morning service. Now you know what the city of David and why we make a big deal about the city of David. How did the city of David come about? Was Jerusalem always Jerusalem? The Jerusalem that it is today?
The city had already existed. He conquered it, turned it into Jerusalem.
City already existed. We turned it into what it is today and what it was in Jesus' day. And the city of David came about how? How did the city of David come about? With what Sister Ruby just read.
Conquered the Jesuits.
Okay, he conquered who?
Jebusites.
Okay, that dwelled there, right? And when he conquered the Jebusites, what are some of the things that he did where the city is named after David? What are some things that he did when he removed them? What did some of the people say about this city?
Well, they were cocky. They said even the blind and the handicapped people could fight you off. Don't go and you can't go in there.
Right, right. Now the city of David is called the city of love. And from that day on, that day went into prophecy, and Jesus came on the scene in the lineage of who? David. So only thing I had to do is rewind and go all the way back on how the city started, what was the requirements, what the city meant from generation after generation after generation after David to Jesus, and now you get the prophecy fulfilled. In the city of David during Jesus' day, what are some things that happened in the city that you can equate with what happened just now? In Jerusalem, in the city of David, what are some things that happened that happened back then? Well, Jesus had blind people and lame people.
In verse 8, they were discriminated against because it says the blind and the lame won't enter the palace. And in Jesus' time, the blind and the lame people were always on the outside looking.
Right. Right. See how the prophecy worked its way out to Jesus? The same discrimination that was going on in this time was the same discrimination that was going on in Jesus' time. And Jesus did what? Jesus unified everyone to the mindset of God. The very people that was being discriminated against, misused, and abused, Jesus liberated. All those miracles were to who? Poor people, people in poverty, people that didn't have a voice. That's the city of David. The prophecy fulfilled, and somehow humanity still didn't see the thread that God was building for his son to sit on the throne that will reign forever and ever. That's the simplest way to explain the prophecy of Jesus coming through this lineage and going back and proving the very fact that the same thing that occurred then occurred in the same city when Jesus was walking on this earth. And the same thing that God required to be done, and who is the father and the champion of, is the same thing his son did. So when you start asking the question, finding God in worship, okay, now we should be able to fill in number 3 on some of these things. We should start with those who don't have a voice for themselves. God is that person. He is that spirit that is for everyone. He made himself accessible to everyone in his creation. And finding him in worship, these are some of the attributes that you're going to find in God. These are some of the things that with your presence, you should be willing to do in spirit and truth through God's word to make him happy in worship. Because when you worship God and you worship him in spirit and truth, won't he be pleased? He'll be pleased. Now, to not please God is to get chapter 4. To get chapter 4. Remember, Israel did, in their divided kingdom, Israel did a lot of things as sub-tribes that got themselves in trouble when God warned them, when he brought them on the other side of the Red Sea. Do not do X, Y, and Z. Don't be like your neighbors. If you do, I'm going to treat you like I treat your neighbors who don't worship me the way I want to be worshiped. And God got very specific about what type of worship he wanted, when he wanted it, and how he wanted it. But they refused to give God what he wanted, therefore not loving him in truth and spirit. And what he said he was going to do to them from generation to generation, he did, because they broke the covenant with him. Remember, they said what at the bottom of Mount Sinai? Remember when God appeared in thunder and lightning? Everybody was afraid. Moses, please get in between us and God. We promised that we would do X, Y, and Z. Whatever God asks us to do, we're going to do. We're going to worship him in truth. We're going to make sure we don't bow down to no other gods. They said that. You think God didn't hear that? And now they start doing things that they don't supposed to do. Samuel ran to God and said, look, man, they keep bothering me about this physical king thing. I mean, every time I turn around, they're looking around left and looking around right, and they want to be like these people. Remember, the United States is how many states? How many states make up the United States? Every time that question is asked, you know what? People start at 51, 52. We have 50 states, y'all. Why y'all keep trying to add some stuff to America?
Puerto Rico not a state.
Puerto Rico's not a state.
They would have been messed up with the hurricane. They would have had resources.
Yeah,
That's why he was throwing them toilet paper, because they're not a state.
How many states we got?
50. There's 50
Yo, we
United States.
We got 50 states. I know y'all look at Puerto Rico, you look at some of these other things, you just try to add that stuff to America. Remember, we have territories. We have
they treated Puerto Rico.
provinces,
Wow.
you know, so just know that. And all those 50 states, do every one of those states govern the same way? No. There are some laws that are applicable in Connecticut. Well, let's take gun laws. The 50 states split association with gun laws. There are some states where my gun permit is permissible, and then there are some states that are not permissible with Connecticut. Okay? There used to be a federal gun permit before the Black Panthers. That means you and I can go get a federal gun permit that will allow us to carry a gun in all 50 states. Okay? Prior to that, the Panther movement, anyone can purchase a gun. Well, you can still purchase a gun in some of the southern and western states, and you don't have to have a registration. North is a little different with that. North, it's kind of funny about people just walking in places, buying stuff, and walking right out with it. Did 14-day background check, all that kind of stuff. But down south and in the west, you can do your gun laws are a little loose. You can carry guns on your side. You can have a gun rack in your pickup truck in some of the western states. So your gun laws are different from state to state. Now, if you're a gun owner, I think you better know that if you go in another state and purchase a gun and have intentions of bringing that gun back to your state, because there are border laws that won't allow you to cross the border into New York or Massachusetts or Connecticut or Rhode Island the way you do in Nevada, Wyoming, Utah, and things like that. So you got to know the gun laws just in case you get stopped. Now, the rule of thumb is if you have a gun permit and you are transporting a gun, the ammunition can be easily accessible to the firearm itself. So if you got a trunk The gun has to be in one place, and the ammunition got to be in the glove compartment or something like that. It cannot be together. Or if it is, it must be wrapped and sealed. Okay, so that's why when people get stopped, and you look up under the seat and find a loaded gun, all different kinds of rules apply against the carrying of that weapon without a permit to carry. New York City only gave a certain amount of permits out for a certain sector of people. They have a mandatory 1-year gun law offense with a gun. Flexible Burris, remember him in the club? In his sweatpants, the gun fell out and it shot him in the leg. That's a 1-year mandatory sentence for that gun law. New York City has one of the highest strict gun laws in the country. Some states do not have gun laws that are governed that strict. You can just go buy, purchase a gun as if you was going buying king. And you can buy as much ammunition as you want. You can go home, you can go in your backyard, and you can start shooting. But there, they have acreage of land to do that. You shoot in your backyard up here, you're going to shoot somebody. You miss that can, it's going to go through somebody's kitchen window and it's going to shoot somebody in the kitchen. So laws are made differently. Now, our United States make up what for this country? All 50 states make up what? You combine all 50 states in the United States, it's called what?
I don't know, I want to get it wrong.
Just don't say Puerto Rico a state.
It is called the United States of America. And it then falls under a government that governs all 50 states beyond their own state government and Supreme Court. David just united 12 tribes and making them one nation that carried even up to today, which is split in a concept of Judaism. Some people who were born in Israel consider themselves as Israelis, not Jews by nationality or religion. So there's a difference. But Israel is a united Israel now. They're not in 12 tribes anymore. Okay, and that's what David did. Saul wasn't able to do that. Matter of fact, it wasn't even on Saul's mind to do that. But remember, 12 brothers from Joseph became 12 tribes. And those 12 tribes existed in bondage in Egypt. When you came out of Egypt and got free, those 12 tribes started doing what they wanted to do. And then you had a divided kingdom. You had the northern kingdom and you had the southern kingdom. And if it wasn't for David, God would have got rid of Judah too. Okay, so now here you are talking about a city that the Gospels make a big deal about when it always making reference to Jesus and the city of David. So let's fill in this. 3 steps in worshiping God. Our presence, obedience, love, spirit, and truth. Praise, faith in him. What else? Y'all want to just leave me out here by myself?
Okay.
I mean, when you come here on Sunday morning, what are you doing? What are some of the things you bringing in to worshiping God? Hmm? Well, you better be happy to be here to, I mean, you just can't, well, some do, but I mean, when you come, David said, it is glad, I'm glad when they said, let's go to the house of the Lord. So on Sunday in worship, you should be happy to be here. Amen? Because it is a time of peace. It is a time of love. It is a time of spiritual awakeness. It is time to examine the truth. It is a time for us to, in our presence, give him the obedience and adoration and reverence that he deserved in his time of worship. Remember, when we worship God, it's not our time. It's his time. And he wants it the way he wants it. Okay? Y'all agree?
Yeah.
Y'all struggling with some of this stuff. There's 3 steps. Now, Ruby, in your book, what are the 3 steps in the book?
Matthew chapter 5. All over the 5 now.
Chapter 4. This that she sent you.
Mm-hmm. Did you go that far?
We didn't do
Oh,
4
that
before you got here. We didn't
Oh, y'all didn't?
do. We only read Samuel because you said you were doing the last question.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I'm ahead of you then.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's why you look at me the way you look at me. Okay. All right. All right. Let me go back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. Last question, one of the last questions on lesson 3 of conflict. And we'll recap for a few minutes and then we'll finish. Matthew 5, verse 21. What does it say?
You have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court.
Okay, someone read Matthew 18 in comparison to Matthew 5, 21.
The whole thing.
Pick out in Matthew 18 what applies to Matthew 5:21, and then read that passage. I don't want to give it away. Take your time. Because we will finish up talking about judgment. In Matthew 18, judgment falls under the area of offense. So find that in Matthew 18 what I should do on how I handle offense. And then read that for us. Because when I'm offended, if I'm offended, should I judge you or should you judge me? Peter asked the question, so I'll start there. And then you can start.
So Matthew 18:21. And Peter came and said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Let him said to him, I do not. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven is greater than he had begun to settle on one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Since he did not have the means to repay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, along with his wife and children, all that he had, and gave it to him. The slave fell to the ground and prostrated himself before him, saying, have patience with me, and I will repay you everything. And the Lord of the slave felt compassion and released him and forgave him to death.
If I'm judging and I'm in judgment and conflicts, what am I in danger of according to 5:21? I'm in danger of what? If my judgment is not righteous. I left it off.
We'll go back to 50. Go back to 50.
In Matthew chapter 5, what am I in danger of in that passage? Just go back to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. I'm in danger of what? What are some things about Matthew 18 an offense according to Peter's question that will cause an offense? What are some things? Someone look up offended or offense and tell me the definition of it. Before we go on to chapter lesson 4. What is the Webster or the Wikipedia or whoever definition of offense? Okay, doing somebody wrong. Okay. All right. What is the definition? When y'all got your smartphone? What is the definition of offense?
A breach of a law or rule, an illegal act, either offense violating federal law, a thing that constitutes violation of what is judged to be right or natural.
What is just, right, or natural? You also said illegal law, right?
Illegal act, yes.
Okay. Ronnie, you just offended me. How does that apply to the definition?
Instead of taking it to court.
Okay. Okay. Because if Christians take the offense to a court for judgment, what does that say about the law itself, the Bible itself? What does that show in the court system? That what?
Are you going to the world for the world to judge you?
Now, in the body, my offense or Ronnie's offense to me, if I keep that to myself, is that harming anything?
Yes.
What? Ronnie doesn't know she offended me yet. I haven't told her.
So you're going to be upset. And she's going to tell you.
So I mean the whole body, the whole church.
Yeah, it goes back to the source. Now, you're offended, your worship's going to be impacted by what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and in turn, God's going to be suffering.
They're not worshiping.
You're not worshiping the spirit.
Right.
And then you leave the church to go to her.
Main thing is not being fixed between both of them.
She doesn't know it yet.
She doesn't know it, so you have to go back to her and sit down and talk to her about what she has said to you about the situation.
Last week we talked about bringing your offering to what? To the altar and leaving it and going doing what?
Going and talk to whoever around you.
Okay. So I just can't keep it to myself. Now, what level of offense? What level of offense will the offense become will affect my presence in worshiping him with me and Ron?
You have a different attitude. You're gonna have a different attitude.
That's I think that's the tricky part too, because something that might be an offense to me is a big one to you, right? So that's when you gotta assess that. If it's big enough where it's affecting you, and your worship negatively, then you gotta say something, even if the other person don't feel like it is an issue.
Yeah, me personally, I just think as long as if there's anything that you even something small, it doesn't sit right with you. it's best for you just to, because then it's going to linger and it's going to be on your mind longer and longer. So it could be something that's small, as they're not saying good morning to you that day or something like that. It's just the fact that, it bothers you, maybe you should go to her and talk about it and get off your chest, because, it has brothers and sisters in Christ who should be able to talk to each other, man. Something about it.
But it's not speaking to me a definition of offense.
It depends how you act, and I guess when it comes to like worship, we all supposed to be able to worship together and talk to each other and be happy and joyful. So if she's not joyful, then she's kind of offended God, because the reason why He wants us in church on Sunday is so we can worship Him and uplift His name. And you can't do that if something's wrong with it. Something else is online.
Matthew 18 is very hard, brothers and sisters. You know why? Because we take definitions from the world and we bring definitions from the world into the church and the offenses. God died on the cross while we were yet enemies. We have to understand and define what true offense is so we can be able to come in here on Sunday and worship God. Conflict starts when I don't allow my unresolved issues to be handled, taken care of with things that I think another person has done to me. Ronnie doesn't know she did anything to me. I go to Ronnie and I tell Ronnie I think she offended me because she didn't speak to me when she walked into church or out in the hallway. Ronnie gonna look at me and she's gonna say, number one, I don't know what you're talking about. But if my level of offenses are defined by Ronnie not speaking to me, is that a legitimate definition of offenses?
It could be. Like, most relationships do not end because someone cheated on you. Most relationships, after a while, the way the person breathes annoys you. You know why? Because there's a combination of little things that never got addressed. If somebody don't speak to me at church, that's rude. If someone interrupts me, if me and Ricardo's talking and Kuman comes, that's rude to me, the way that I am. That may not be rude to Kuman. But if after a while, every Sunday, me and Ricardo can't talk because Kuman keeps interrupting, me and Ricardo may feel away. Kuman can't say, oh, y'all can't feel away. Because that me and Ricardo's right. If we feel away, you interrupting us, that is offensive to us. He can't be like, oh, grow up, man. I needed to say something. To me, it's offensive, just like in relationships. Somebody may say, why can't you close the cabinet? You may say, what's the big deal? If the cabinet's open that way, I just grab the salt. That may become a deal breaker for someone. I can't be like, oh, what's the big deal? Get over the toilet seat being up or down. Life not like that. Most things are a combination of small things. There's very few times in your life do you have these major wars. A lot of times you start arguing over past things that you never said in the thing you did right now. So I may already have an issue with Kumar. So it's not so much that he's interrupting me, but that's the last straw. And now I lash out at him and he like, man, I didn't know you felt that way. So I feel like that is the issue of people may be affected by certain things and let it fester, which will boil over into a conflict because that is your issue. I think part of what's wrong with society right now is people trying to tell someone they shouldn't be offended. Look, as ads, advertising, some of that stuff is offensive. You can't tell me, oh, well, you black, get over it. No, as a woman, some of it is offensive. That's what's wrong. You got, oh, that's not a sexual harassment. What? How are you going to tell her? She feel harassed. That's what's wrong with society. We try to tell people, oh, you shouldn't be offended by that. Life don't work that way. We should be more so of trying to communicate with each other to hear, so that Kuman and me and Ricardo can all hear where we're coming from. And Kuman can say, oh, I never intended to be offensive by interrupting you. Maybe if I hear and he hears, then we don't get offended. But without that dialogue and communication, which all of Matthew 5:23 and the Matthew 18:15 is talking about communication, the part where we don't do in church.
We get to conflict because we don't resolve issues. The reason we don't resolve issues is because we won't talk to one. How do I know what's bugging you if I don't know that that's bugging you? I got some crazy behavior that may not work with our relationship. I may say some things to Ronnie that Ronnie don't like, but because Ronnie's my sister, I expect her to tolerate that. Now, if I kept that between me and Ronnie, we're good. The apostles didn't understand, but man, how many times do I have to forgive this person? Hey, this can kind of like be a real pain, Jesus. Jesus didn't care. The issue should be resolved between you and your brother, you and your sister, before it becomes conflict. Because when it becomes conflict and other people get involved in this, what happens to your issue or my issue with Ronnie? It's everybody else's issue. And remember, Crystal, like Ronnie, because that's her sister, Crystal don't have the issue that I have with Ronnie. Therefore, I'm forcing Crystal to be judgmental toward me because of my unresolved issues with Ronnie. And now there's 3 people involved in my issue with Ronnie. And it's conflict. David had a very unique way, being guided by God, to handle things in a way that brought things to a head so we can get one nation under God. And that means everybody had to come to terms with how they felt. And people had to understand this is not going to work. And he is king. I mean, something got to give here. And those who didn't want to be bothered with that, they lost their lives because they simply didn't want to do what was right. If we say, y'all, stop, what does stop mean? I mean, it's painted red on street signs. It means stop. It doesn't mean breeze through like a yellow light. Stop means stop. How many times does stop mean? Stop. One time. If I say stop irritating me by X, Y, and Z, how many times do I have to say that? If we don't come to terms with that, is it resolved? No. This turns into what? Conflict behavior. Because you're not listening to me. Churches are like that all the time. Churches split because of conflict. Kingdoms fall because of conflict. A group of people believe this, a group of people believe that, and you get right down the middle, and it's called a civil war. And in a civil war, brother fights brother. Who wins? The same blood is being shed on the ground. Who wins? The guy that's standing when it's all said and done? And then generations down the road, the conflict starts again. You see what the Bible is trying to teach us? Now, some people don't like confrontations. How many folks like confronting people? Very hard. Especially when Jesus demands that you do it in love. Very hard to go up to a person and say, you know something, we need to talk. Invite them over for some tea, biscuits, crackers, tuna fish, I don't care what you do. But get them out from around their comfort zone. Sit down and say, you know something, we need to talk. I just noticed that there's something that's going on here. And maybe it's me, and that's why you're here to help me clear it out. You're here to help me. Because maybe I need to look at this a different way. I don't like it when you say this, or I don't like it when you do this to me. I'm talking about nobody else, to me. You say, oh, wow, man, my bad. I didn't know I was doing that. Well, now you do. You should say, my deepest apology. Because now we got something on the table that we just cleared. Your ability to hear me, that's number one. And then your ability to validate my feelings. Right? Correct? I mean, that's all that is. It's simple. I know it's hard, but it's simple. Before your rockets start coming out of your ears and you start sweating under your nose and all that kind of stuff, and your ears start tingling, heart start racing, I'm terribly sorry. Will check myself and won't do that again. We'll never get here. Excuse me, we'll never get here. But if I tell you, you tell her, you tell this one, you're sitting down, so you know what? Ellis is this, Ellis is that. 2 or 3 people know that Ellis is this and Ellis is that. That's going to color their opinion of who Ellis is, and I never said those things to them. Now, it's conflict. And how do you resolve something that gets that big? When you get 2, 3, 4, 5 people involved in something, it's hard to squash that. Because if you say something to somebody, now you got 4 people against 1. Oh, wow, I didn't know he was like that. How many times have you heard that? Oh, I didn't know he was like that. Then you're going to start looking for things in my behavior to validate what your friend just told you about me. And in the church, that's very dangerous because now brotherly love is being lost. And the kingdom can't grow that way. That's Satan's way of getting in and doing just like this. This aisle that's in between these chairs right here, that's what he do. He separates the congregation. He has to do it through people because remember, this doesn't listen to Satan. This doesn't listen to him. It don't. Once it's manufactured, it's manufactured. But you and me listens to Satan because he can't come in here without coming in here with us. Because remember, wherever the Spirit of God is, Satan can't dwell. I know that's hard for a lot of people to conceptualize. But remember who has the power. Who has the ultimate power? God does. And if God has the ultimate power and wherever God is, what makes you think in Scripture that we have already proven that everybody comes before God, the sons of God, including Satan, that Satan can just walk around in the perimeter of God anytime he wants. But through faith, you and I don't know that and recognize that. Dev?
This goes to when you live your when you are to worship and you let their way to go. The point is here that you have to go to console for your brother where your problem is. And it says, for example, the Revelation 2, 4 or 5 is one of the examples. And before that, I would like to read this. James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sin to each other and pray for each other, so you may be likewise 2, 4, and 5. I would like to mostly 5. Remember, therefore, from where you have come, repent and do the first work, or else I will come to you to give. It means if we don't feel that, and it tells this, the first John chapter 5 verse 16, it says, if anyone see his brother sinning with does not lead to death. So there is so many kind of sin that we commit against our brother, that we have to be careful. And first of all, we do every day kind of sin that we will have forgiveness. The 70 times 7, which is the example that we are reading. But there is so many kind of sin that we commit against our brother and sister. Therefore, we have to understand this, all the verses. And even though the David, the king, did, there wasn't forgiveness. And we can learn from Old Testament to New Testament. That's my statement as well as learning. Okay. Therefore, very careful when we come to worship. We cannot judge others. We just coming to worship myself. I see what others doing. I'm not worshiping. I'm judging. Therefore, I'm just coming to worship myself, because the relation is between me and my God. There's no other than that. If I feel I am not worthy of at that day to worship, I cannot take the Lord's cup and the bread. I'm not worthy of that because I judge myself. I have done wrong against him. If I really am confessing to me.
Okay. All right. That question is now answered. You move in. Next week, we'll move into chapter 6. The first thing David does behind all this mess here is restore this. Remember, in restoring this, all of them was told the same thing at the same time. Just remember that. The Bible moves very fast when it's talking about incident after incident after incident, and pretty soon you forget how it all started. Remember, in order to come into the church, when a church is full of this, you have to restore that. Because to the point that Deb just made, there's a whole lot of foolishness going on, and Corinth was a perfect example of that. That's why it was written. When things happen to the point and to the level of this can't possibly be going on. Because you can just come in and sit in the back of the congregation and watch the people, how they worship God on Sunday. You don't know how severe that is. So when we started out finding God in worship, when you come in here and your mind is not on why you're here, he didn't get what he was asked, what he asked for. Therefore, who's in trouble?
Who is judging?
See? And that now affects who?
Everyone. The family, the whole body.
The whole congregation. That's why those letters went out to those 7 churches. I have this against you. Remember, when there is foolishness, God can't take a deep breath. He can't accept what is not given by him. In any fragment, he can't accept a percentage of Christians over here doing it the right way, a percentage of Christians here not doing it the right way. The minister is preaching one thing, a brother or a sister back there is thinking another thing. Remember, all that goes up to him on the Lord's day. So if the congregation is not right in worship, our worship is not right. So if we're part of the conflict, God is not accepting the worship because he can't go against what he set up for worship. Remember, it's not about me and you when we walk in the door or under a tree or in a tunnel or down by the seashore. It's about how he wants to be adorned respectfully. So if we individually don't have it together, David knew that I got to restore this from that, or I'm in trouble too as king. Because he's not going to accept my worship. God is that way. And we have to start understanding that, brothers and sisters, and know that to be true, that you got to look to the person next to you and say, you know what? And you get so distracted on Sunday morning, don't you? Kid's going to say something. The neighbor's going to say somebody, he's bringing to ask you a question. You get so distracted here. You have to say to people, time out. This is some serious thing going on here. I want to sing where I can edify my brothers and sisters. That's what my singing do. I want to pray so my prayers can be heard. I want to take the Lord's Supper so I can sup with him, giving him the credit for his body and his blood. I want to hear a portion of his word so I can be free. And that's only going to occur on this first day of the week. And then I'm out. We do not hold you here long. I get long-winded sometimes, but I don't hold you here 3 hours. Are you here 3 hours? I mean, are we still in here 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon? No, we're out. But that's what he wants. And if we don't give that to him, don't think for 1 minute you can come in here, you can praise your Lord by yourself, sitting over there, not being part of this body, and he accept the worship. You got to take revelation out of the picture if you think that's possible. Because that's why they was wrong. Okay? So we make it simple, or we can make it hard. But one thing David did, and I love him for this, I truly do, because I know now how God defined his heart. He wanted people to get back to this. And at that particular time and stage in their life, that was very hard to do. Just do a timeline study from Joseph, Egypt, to David in the city of David. Do a timeline study. See how many generations have passed and see where the temple is. Remember, it ain't here yet. The Ark of the Covenant is. And that's what God is. Sitting in there in between them two cherubims. And he demands to be worshiped that way. And they foolishly let the Ark of the Covenant get taken in battle. Therefore, what happened to their worship? It was gone. Because the presence of God was what? Removed. Okay? Again, so many scenarios I can build on this, but I think you get the picture. Okay?